Hi, it's Alaska Granny. Are you wondering what's the cheapest way that you can have a large amount of food for emergencies, how to get started with your food storage, and what's an easy, simple, basic food for preppers? Well, you may have heard all the jokes about rice and beans, beans and rice, but it isn't really a joke. The reason people tell you, grab 20 pounds of rice, grab 20 pounds of beans, and they tell you to do that first. Well, there's a simple reason. In a real emergency situation, 20 pounds of rice and 20 pounds of beans could feed one person for an entire month. 1 pound of beans equals 1,600 calories. 1 pound of rice also has 1,600 calories. If you plan for an average adult to need 2,000 calories per day, 20 pounds of rice and 20 pounds of beans are going to more than equal the amount of food you would need in a month. Your 2,000 calories per day times 30 days in a month is 60,000 calories. Do some simple math. The 1,600 calories times 20 pounds of rice and 20 pounds of beans is going to give you that correct amount of calorie count in your food. Beans and rice are also going to be a great way to pack in some carbohydrates and some protein. Is that the optimum meal that you want to eat every single day? Well, of course, the answer is no. But if you had nothing else to eat, would you be happy to have a pot of rice and beans? That's how you decide if you're willing to stockpile rice and beans. Are you willing to spend the amount of money stocking up on 20 pounds of rice and 20 pounds of beans so that you could have enough food for one person for a month? The price of rice and beans varies where you live and which store you go to, but you can usually find them in bulk prices, large bags, and bring them home 20 pounds at a time. But if you don't have that kind of money to make that initial investment, stock them up one bag at a time, maybe a 1 pound bag or a 2 pound bag, and begin to bring home the bags from the grocery store when you shop. Then little by little you can grow your food storage so that you have enough food. Stored properly, rice and beans can last for 30 years or even longer, but you need to make sure that you store them in a cool, dry place. You need to store them out of the air in a container that can't be chewed open or infested by rodents or insects. So you can't just bring them home in a bag and put them in your pantry and expect them to remain the freshest possible for the longest period of time. You need to seal them up in an airtight container. It can be as simple as sealing them into a jar. I like to store rice and beans in my extra canning jars. It's a nice size, they're easy to move around, they're easy to keep track of, and you can tell in your pantry what you have. You can use the metal lids and rings as is, but it's better if you add an oxygen absorber, or if you have the food saver, to use the attachment that vacuum seals the jars with the food saver attachment. But sealing them in the jars is a very good start to keeping the air out. Some people like to store rice and beans in food grade buckets. You can get them sometimes at the grocery store. Go to the bakery department and ask them. I've had good luck with that, and they give them away for free every time I've asked. You do need to check and make sure that your lid has the rubber gasket inner seal. That's what's going to seal it up so that it's airtight. If it doesn't have the rubber gasket, it's not good for storing food for it to last. You could store other goods in your bucket. It's still a useful bucket, but you need that rubber gasket to make it sealed up tight for your food. You can just store the food in the bucket with a tight-fitting lid, and that'll store it for a long period of time. But a better way would be to get the Mylar pouches and seal it in a Mylar bag, where you add an oxygen absorber and seal up the Mylar bag. One of the problems with that is the bucket can hold 35 pounds of rice and beans, and that could be too much for you to carry around or move, or it could be too much for you to want to open at one time. You can get smaller size Mylar bags, seal it up into smaller amounts, and keep several of those in your bucket. Another way to get the longest life out of your rice and beans is to buy them already sealed in a number 10 can. If you buy them in the number 10 cans, They have about 5 pounds of food. You can buy them from the LDS or the Mormon Church online. They come in a case of 6 rice or 6 beans. The prices vary. Or another good option is to look at walmart.com. You can buy the Augustin Farms rice and beans. Those cost a little bit more than the ones that you get from the LDS Church, but they're also sealed up to last for 30 years. They're in a size that's handy to use. It's not too heavy to move around, and most of us could use up 5 pounds of rice or 5 pounds of beans at one time rather than 35 pounds from a bucket. You can also buy them already sealed in a big bucket from Augustin Farms. And the beauty of that is if you're buying them in a bucket or a can that's been sealed, they're already packaged and everything to last for 30 years. If you bring home a big bag of rice, you may pay less for it, but then you have to figure out the cost of the bucket, you need the cost of the Mylar bags, you need the cost of the oxygen absorbers, and they may not be readily available where you live. So it's up to you to decide. Do you want to start small? Do you want to start with a middle size? Or do you want to go all in and get a big bucket full? Decide for yourself. How much rice and beans would it take so you had enough to feed your family for 30 days? If things go bad in the world, that's a cheap way to have a bountiful supply of foods you can feed your family. We never know what's coming. That's why we need to stock up as we go. Make sure you're buying foods you'll actually eat and then rotate them. Incorporate these kind of foods in your day-to-day menu plans. Doesn't mean eat rice and beans every day. Serve them once a week, every other week. There's lots of different ways to make soups, stews, casseroles, all kinds of things with rice and beans. It's also important to stock up on canned goods, packaged goods, things you can just open and eat that are ready prepared meals, so that in just a short-term emergency, if say the power goes out, you can just open something and eat it. That's not when you want to start cooking your rice and beans. Short-term emergencies, you want to go to your pantry and eat the everyday common foods that you're used to eating. Rice and beans require a lot of water for preparation. These are all dried foods, that's why they last such a long time. So for every jar, can, or bucket of rice and beans that you stockpile, make sure you're storing water. Then you'll have the things you need no matter what comes along. Learn more at alaskagranny.com. Please subscribe to the Alaska Granny channel.